Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Community Benchmarking Workgroup meeting for October 16th, 2018. We'll follow our standard agenda as posted in the issue in the benchmarking workgroup meeting. So first things, anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share? No, okay. So I'm gonna paste into the chat the link to the minutes. Yeah, so if people can add themselves to the minutes in terms of attendees, that would be great. And then we'll move on to the issues. Okay, so no announcements. So the first thing on the agenda is simplify multiple scripts, logs, and Node.js benchmarking infrastructure 155. So Udom, you ordered that one. You want to take that away?
I mean, technically, we would have ordered that one about a year and a month ago.
Sorry, say that again?
Technically, Udom ordered this one a year and a month ago, but...
Okay.
Udom, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
How about now?
Yep,
yes.
Now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. So yeah, I opened it after, when I added Node.js, I saw that how it wasn't difficult per se, but it wasn't very straightforward to add a workload. And then most of the workloads have a certain way of starting them, certain requirements. So every workload is different. But given that, I thought that maybe it would be a good idea to have some common infrastructure to run one script which give a name of a workload and it would just run. And right now we don't have, looks like. And I believe I talked to Jamie last time during the conference, and we kind of agreed that would be beneficial overall as an overall strategy. But I have not done anything. This was just what I thought at the time, and I think it is still valid and it's still a good idea.
So I agree with this. I was recently looking into adding my own thing for an NPM install job, and I thought, boy, I wonder how I'm supposed to implement this. And there isn't a consistent way to implement a benchmark, and so it's hard to put a new one in, and it's sort of a discouragement in that regard. So if we want more benchmarks, I think it'd be great to have some coherent, I don't know if we want to go as far as like a tooling driver thing, or just like, implement these 6 scripts and put them in a bin directory inside the benchmark. I'm fine either way. But
when you say these 6 scripts, what do you mean by like?
Yeah, so in the issue 155, Udom suggests, I guess, 10 scripts, but every benchmark will have a script you invoke that says install the dependencies, and every benchmark will have a script you invoke that says load. You would give the script a set of IP addresses on which it can deploy any dependencies like MongoDB database, or all the places you can put a microservice or something, and then it lets you know when it's ready, and then you launch the client and you use some config file that's in a universally agreed upon location, and that kind of thing. And because the different benchmarks currently all do that kind of thing, they all have variations on the same theme of how to do this. But it'd be great if they were the same theme instead of just variations on it, in my mind.
Yeah, no, I think, well, I agree, standardizing it would be great. Just a matter of doing the work to make it happen, I think.
Yeah, so I'm happy to contribute effort on this one. I maybe have an undergrad to help with this. We'll see if he's interested in it, but maybe in the next 3 to 5 weeks, we could get that done.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good thing. In terms of like transitioning the existing ones, were you thinking of like starting with a new one to put them into place, or taking one of the existing ones and moving it? What sort of?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and it kind of goes to the question of what do we want to be in the benchmarking repo versus in some other place. Like, do we want each benchmark to have its own GitHub repository so it's easy to track changes to it? Do we want them all to be in the node/benchmarking in their own little subdirectories?
I think it kind of depends on, like, I don't think we're going to pull in, say, Acme Air already has its own repo. So, right, like, I don't think we want to try and make copies of that stuff.
Yeah.
But the sort of framework for repo, I'm not sure they need their own. Like, if we're going to pull in Acme Air and then run it, I'm thinking we'd end up with an awful lot of repos if we want one per benchmark.
Yeah.
So a directory, like a subdirectory structure in the benchmarking repo, I think would be fine.
Okay.
Like, unless there's some reason why it would be better to do it the other way, that seems like an easy way to. And it's kind of what we already have, like in terms of like the chart generation. There's already a directory for each of them, and I think we already have a directory, possibly misnamed because they started under experimental and are still under experimental, but like a directory where they go. So maybe we want to like create a new directory which isn't experimental, and then have a directory for each of the new ones. And as we transition them to the new structure, we could move them over to there, right?
Yeah. So just for my information, I have wondered about the choices of names for the directories in this repository. Is there some hint about why things are named, what they're named, and how to keep track of them?
So I probably would say there's probably no great rationale, which if you have specific questions, like experimental was there because we started to add them in, and I used experimental because we weren't quite, like, they weren't done yet, although they ended up being used for a long time.
Yeah.
Benchmarks is the directory that actually has the explanation of the benchmarking infrastructure, the IDs, and then the individual sort of files for each of the chart generation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why the chart generation separate from the actual thing itself? We may be able to get rid of that, if that made sense. The only thing we'd have to check is, like, there is some automatic scanning by the benchmark, by the chart generation thing of those directories. So we just wouldn't want to add anything that might confuse it if we decide to make them common. Tools is more things that aren't tied to any one benchmark. So those are actually like accept results, chart gen, and post results are just things that are used on the benchmarking machine. One to generate the charts, one to post results from where the benchmarks run to a machine that has a SQLite database.
Yeah.
And accept results is the little thing that runs on that machine to like accept the results and post them into the database.
Okay.
Benchmark data just has some stuff in terms of how they're set up. But yeah, I guess I have no great good rationale for the naming or strong attachment to what's there. So
if I open pull requests that rename a lot of stuff and put a bunch of readmes in, you're not going to be sad.
As long as we do it carefully, and for example, like, because this repo is cloned and used to generate the charts.
Yeah.
So if we renamed the benchmarks directory, that would actually break all the chart generation.
Yeah.
So we just need to coordinate that in any renames in a way that doesn't break the existing stuff.
So if I created a set of new directories that, say, began with an underscore or something, so we could track sort of old and new.
Right.
does anything depend on like it runs an ls and then goes and looks around in directory?
No. So adding new directories is fine.
Okay.
I mean, I think as opposed to adding underscores or something like that, it might be
Well,
good.
in case I wanted to use the word benchmarks or something, then I would use an
Right.
underscore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if like we could potentially just figure out a directory to put all new stuff under or something if we thought that made sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll try to whip up a proposal for that. Just sort of.
Sounds good.
I'll try to make sense of what's in here and how to organize it. That'll hopefully come in as part of the agreeing on scripts and stuff.
Sounds good.
Is there some reason that shell scripts are preferred over other languages, or is that a deliberate choice, or just it happens that
it's that we don't have to install anything else, right? Like we know that's going to run. Probably Perl would also work.
Yeah,
fine because that's installed on all of our machines. We don't, but we don't necessarily want to have to install new dependencies. Currently, we run on a single machine, but the other thing we never got to was actually updating our Ansible template, which creates that machine.
Yeah.
And we do have 3 of them now, and if we, for example, wanted to have the test be able to run across any of our CI machines, add new dependencies just sort of expand the set of what's needed there. So,
okay, so I kind of figured that was what was in one of these directories has. Where is it? Benchmark data has a file called bench machine setup, which includes packages to install.
Right.
I assumed that was being handled automatically, but I guess now that I'm looking at it, maybe that's sort of note to self type file.
It's more like that. So if we look here, Ansible, I'm sure we definitely, maybe it's in build. We definitely had an issue. Let me see if I can find it. Build. Where we had one here, which was like an issue saying, hey, we should actually update our Ansible. Like we need Ansible scripts for, maybe it's on the next page. Right.
It might be based off an issue that I opened for getting, I think it was a new version of R or something like that installed.
Right.
I know there was some issue that I raised in the build work group, and then it sort of brought up, hang on, why aren't you adding this to the Ansible script? Oh, we don't have one.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's issue number 116, which says something about installing Clang.
Yeah, it should have been one which is like we need to have an Ansible script for the benchmarking machine.
Yeah, I don't see anything like that.
Because I even swear, Udom, you don't remember that? Because I could swear it was assigned to you at some point.
There was no Ansible script. I remember you and we talked saying we should create one, and I was going to work on it or something. But I kind of just drifted off the topic. But yeah, we never had an Ansible script.
Okay.
So that's what for all of our other machines, we have an Ansible script which automatically configures the machines. Yeah. We need to get that in place for the benchmarking machines as well.
So if I wanted such an Ansible script as a template, where would I look for that?
So if you go over to build, here, let me find, I'll get a link to that. It's unfortunately not quite as simple as a single script, but this is the link to where all the existing Ansible scripts are for the rest of the infrastructure. And it's got an introduction to, what they look like. And in the end, there's like there ends up being like a worker profile or something like that. And what we need is like an extension of a Jenkins worker, which is like a Jenkins build worker. Sorry, Jenkins benchmarking worker.
Okay. Would those changes end up in the build, or would they?
They would end up in the build repo, right? Because the build working group manages configuring the machines and running Ansible on them. So they would end up over there where we would have something that basically installs the regular stuff that you need to have a test worker in Jenkins, and then says, yeah, okay, for the build machines, we also install these manual things. And I still think there is an issue somewhere in here. I just can't find it right now where we've said like, here are a couple extra things that we've manually installed, because people have said, hey, I want this installed, and we've never been able to get the Ansible part, so we've ended up just going ahead and manually installing them.
Yeah. Perks of it being bare metal is that you actually do know where to look to find it. So
yeah,
you can cheat a little bit.
Yeah, most of the other ones, I mean, we just don't want to.
Okay, well, that's helpful for me. Expect an update at some point about this.
Sounds good. Now, we should probably, like, if you start to take a look at it, it might be useful just to open an issue, say, hey, I'm starting to look at it. Here's what I found so far. And I can chime in seeing that to look again, because I know there's a few things. Like you said, there's some notes to self, but there's definitely some other places that say, here are some other dependencies.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion on that issue that?
So under 155, standardization, so machine setup is one thing, and then thinking what it means to be creating one framework to run all these workloads. So there's definitely, I see that there is going to be a script per workload, which actually knows exactly what to run, not only what to run, but what to test. But there'll be something on the top level which will take care of everything else. For example, right now we have fp.sh for Canary, for Node.js, and I believe for other workloads also. So we don't need multiple copies of them. But instead of making this wholesale changes, we should just talk how exactly we want to have that structure, what it looks like end of the day. We can just talk on that issue and we can finalize the process, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like Jamie's going to make a proposal, and then we can sort of review and
throw mud at it until we figure out something that we're happy with.
Yeah. And one thing about this having a code, it might, right now, I think Node.js we pull from the GitHub, its own GitHub page, and same thing with the Acmere, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
It might get difficult if we, let's say, want to add some other workload which is not our property, but from someone else's, and it might not be, I don't know how exactly it would work if we make a copy and save it here. It might be good idea to just do a git commit, git clone, but just a thought.
Well, I think it comes like the challenge there might be licenses, right? So that's why if we can actually clone from the existing repo and then add something or whatever, that's generally easier, right? So were you suggesting that we make a copy or that we don't make a copy?
I was thinking don't make a copy.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so I think I'd echo that. Like if unless we really have to, not making a copy is better because it just avoids all the license problems.
Yeah, so the implications for new benchmarks on that are, by that logic, should be putting new benchmarks in their own repos and then cloning them when we're actually trying to run the benchmarks?
If it's new repo, like if it's new benchmarks that we're writing, then actually putting them into the repo isn't a problem because they're new.
Right.
And unless we want to have a different license from the standard one, which we use, MIT in the project, I think having them in subdirectories in the benchmarking repo is fine. unless we think they're going to get like so popular or so important that they warrant their own.
Okay.
And we don't expect to change any of the workload. We don't want to change the application for any particular reason. Maybe some environment changes is okay, but we are not going to change any code in the workload, right? So we can just clone it. Maybe it needs some config file. We can make a copy of that, update it, whatever, at that time when we actually do a run.
Okay. Any other discussion? It sounds like Jamie, should we assign that issue to you? Does that make sense?
Sure, you can do that.
Okay.
Makes you happier, you can.
Just, if it's somebody's looking for who's working on it or something, might as well have it be tagged with.
Sure.
Now let me just see if I'm going to be able to do that. 155, right?
Yeah.
Assign. Davis. I think I may only be able to assign to people who are in the team. Does that make sense? No, it's giving me lots of. And you're Davis Jam, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, are you part of the Node.js org yet?
Yes.
Okay, so why can't I? Okay, well, let's take that offline and figure out how to get you added. I'd almost say, given that really looks like you're going to be doing a fair amount of work here, you should probably PR yourself into the benchmarking team.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay, because then I could add you to the team. You'd get the @CCs and so forth. So. Okay. Okay, so anything else on 155? No? Okay. Next one is investigate time taken, number of benchmarks into core 225. So Gareth, you've been looking at that one?
Yeah, I've not made a huge amount of progress on it, to be honest.
Okay. Next one is require perf cached, perf much lower. So I know, Uten, you mentioned you had managed to recreate.
Yeah, I have managed to recreate, but I've not reduced it with exactly the check-in. So maybe I need another week.
Okay.
Before the next meeting, I think I should have that exact commit ID to be identified. And hopefully, if it is somewhere in V8 or any part of the node, I will open an issue appropriately and create a new issue. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
So just to comment on this graph, the require cached PNG that's being cited here. It's sort of hard to read this graph because we're plotting each point individually instead of lines.
Let me take a look. Yeah, it's so there has been comments on that front.
Are there blue points underneath the purple points? Or where did the blue points go after like January?
So let's take a look there. We do have that problem that the current visualization does. So the one thing you can look at is you get the last point, right? So the last blue result is 3581.
Yes.
And so that's likely under you see the lines that are green, although they.
Oh, I guess the scale is such that, yeah, okay. So that giant heap at the bottom is all probably around 3,500.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess you wouldn't really want to log scale these graphs because they shouldn't need a log scale, but in this case. things are weird.
Yeah, exactly. We somehow, you know, and it's, yeah, exactly. Some things are weird that it's been that low, and it's even like, how did it go back down that low for all versions, right? So we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, by the looks of it, it's probably because whatever commit was checked into master, and then it's hit all releases apart from 6, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So it was likely backported to 8 around the same time. Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't heard anybody complaining out in the real world, but it'll definitely.
Yeah, that may be a bad plan for this benchmark, right? If no one, if the thing went down by like 30 times and no one noticed, that may mean we shouldn't be running this benchmark.
It does make you wonder, but I think once we find what it was, we'll hopefully be able to better understand, is like, okay, what happened just made sense or not.
So do we have any kind of like git bisect based tool to track down issues like this?
Oh, I just have my own shell script which is doing that. Get a git log one-liner and kind of go through that.
Okay.
I think you mentioned that you tried git bisect, but your challenge was that the default git commit date or whatever is the one when the commit was open, not when it actually landed.
Right. That was one. That's why I had to do it by hand. Not hand, but a simple way. I can follow through. That's the reason. What I was talking about is, yeah.
There's an option where you can get Git to show you the date that it actually landed too. But I don't know if you can influence the Git bisect to use that date instead of the other one.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can improve that upon what I have, and yeah, that always there's always room for improvement of the scripts.
Is the script you're describing in the repo anywhere, or is that a private?
No, just shell script I have here.
Okay.
I used the same one last time. There was another regression we had with Acme Air, and then I just kind of used just for this purpose. So I narrowed it down to 15 days, sometime in February.
Yeah.
Like it's difficult to kind of go. Then the dates are like not very clear. The check-ins, the commits are not very clear. Which exactly? That's what I need to do next. Maybe week or two. I need to do little manual work there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to Mike the other day that one of the reason is when the check-in commit gets merged, they get merged with different date when you, I think, created the PR, and not when actually get landed. So there's some kind of date, and especially when the commit has a multiple check-in, multiple commits. So a PR has multiple commits. And
yeah, I bet we can improve that if someday.
Yeah, and so the first thought of, it would have probably worth putting that script somewhere as a, hey, here's something that you can use if you need to do a bisect.
Okay.
And then maybe we can, people can look at it and actually make, there might be some suggestions. People who have better insight into Git or whatever might say, oh, wait a sec, add this option and you'll get it in the right order, or that kind of stuff.
Okay. That sounds a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could put it into tools at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or whatever. Tools, or create a new directory like in utilities, or I don't know what.
Well, that's just another word for tools, right?
That is true. Okay, Udom, so I guess we'll just wait to hear from you on that one. It'll be interesting to see what caused the big difference. And we'll go from there. At Ghost, I know that was going to be your next thing, so I'm guessing still waiting on the previous one, right?
So the Ghost is I was able to run the MySQL Docker. Only thing, it was a very specific version, so that took me some work to get it working. But so I can install the MySQL in Docker. I can run the Ghost.js workload. Now I just need to build all these other scripts, to run in benchmarking repo. So I don't know whether we can take Ghost as an example and as a sample application with the new setup we want to do, or should we just, or do I need to just recreate all the scripts?
I think using Ghost as a sort of pilot was a good idea.
Yeah, so it has multiple components which potentially big application need, like it has a database, but in this case, it has a MySQL database, not MongoDB, which is already installed on a system. So we decided we'll run MySQL as part of the Docker. So when the workload starts, there should be a pre-workload which will start the database server.
Yeah.
Then post will be verify the database is running. Then the application will run, which is there will be some pre and post application, and then the client will run and then generate the data. So we should think about the strategy again for this big changes, and we can take those as an example.
Okay, sounds good.
Basically, I'm just taking a note that says we're going to use it to flesh out proposed structure for 155, right?
Yeah, as a proxy, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the next issue on the agenda is number 6, which is proposed.
By the way, I have one question about Ghost before we move on.
Yep.
One problem with Ghost is it does not work with the master node. So there is some code in Node in Ghost where it checks what version of Node are you running. If it is not LTS version, then it does not work. So I don't know how would we test the Canary build and the master build. It works with 6. It works with 8. It works with 10. I checked all of those.
Yeah.
It does not work with 4 and does not with master.
Is it just because of that check?
Yeah, there used to be a flag, the check node version equal to false if you pass that while running Ghost.
Yep.
It used to ignore the version check. But now that has been changed, and I'm not able to figure it out through the code where the check is anymore, but it just does not run with the master branch.
Okay, because effectively,
we
want to disable that, and if it worked, run it anyway, right?
Yeah. So so one thing, and also it runs in 2 modes. It run in a production mode where you need to do npm install production, and then it also run in development mode. But the performance difference is around 10 to 20% between those 2 modes. So there are few tricky things about this workload, but I think we should, as part of this exercise, we'll figure it out what exactly needs. So what we'll do, we clone the workload. If there's some change required, we'll kind of create a new copy of that file, and we'll copy over. We'll clone the workload, copy over the file, and run the workload. Something like that we have to do.
Or I would suggest actually doing it as patches. So basically, like clone the repo and then apply 1 or more patches to. That way, it's clear what's being changed, and we've done that in other places. You always hope that then you don't get broken, but it's worked out okay everywhere else. So.
Yeah, so I probably am, because I don't have a lot of Node JavaScript experience. Maybe I need some help looking through the code about that version check.
Okay.
It wasn't obvious where exactly is doing the check.
Okay. It doesn't sound like that's necessarily a blocker, though, since we could get it running on the LTS versions to start with.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
So is the purpose of that check to like discourage people from running non-stable versions of Node?
Well, I don't think the Ghost developer, they never thought that someone else was going to use it as a benchmark. That's one. They, on their website, they say, please use only the production version of Ghost, the Node runtime. And they guarantee the functionality if you don't use it otherwise. So.
I mean, if we really had trouble, we could just open an issue saying, hey, this is what we're doing. How do you suggest we bypass your check?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So that's a good idea. I can in fact do that also.
Okay.
I'll go open an issue on the Ghost repo, and we'll see what they say.
Yeah.
Because all this takes somebody's time, right?
Yeah.
Someone look at the issue, someone has to respond to it, and but we'll see. We have to. If he is definitely want to use the master and the canary, then we are going to have that issue.
Yeah, but if we can get a cheap answer from them, that's a lot easier than us.
Exactly. Like they may just look at it and say, boom. Otherwise, we'll figure it out, right?
Okay. It's almost ready to go, though.
Sounds good. Okay, anything else on Ghost?
No, I don't have, but I'll open an issue saying, okay, we're going to start work on adding Ghost to our benchmarking setup.
Okay. Okay, so then moving on to number 6, which is candidate benchmarks. Fairly old issue, but we have some more recent comments from Jamie as well as Joran Grief.
Yeah.
So I guess, Jamie, do you want to take us through what's there and what we should be discussing this time?
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of had a discussion about this recently at the summit. The general point of this issue is to say it looks like we've got use cases that aren't covered by our benchmarks, which is not a great thing in terms of finding regressions. What Joran wrote about was specifically the system software, which use case, which is where people try to build sort of like databases or file systems or something using Node. And those are going to have a relatively compute and IO intensive profile, which will look somewhat different from other compute intensive profiles like SSR would, because these would be doing their compute down in C++ land and using the thread pool, probably because they're doing crypto more than pure JavaScript compute. So he gave us here in his post a reasonably detailed description of what he's doing. I don't think that what he's doing looks like what most people do with Node, which is, I mean, incorporating it will be useful for him. There are a couple other groups that I think are doing system software stuff that are in the Node Foundation's app showcase, like HarperDB is trying to build a database, and their application profile is very IO intensive and uses the file system a lot. So, you know, this is sort of some guidance for that system software use case. I don't think it's a huge priority for this group, although obviously the more the merrier in terms of the use cases we can cover. But, you know, we talked at the session, at the benchmarking discussion about how that particular workload is probably not as important as, say, getting an NPM install job in and getting a microservices-based version of existing benchmarks in, both of which are more realistic for, you know, practical, well, not more realistic, but more popular, I think, in deployments.
Right, yeah. Okay, so yeah, no, I agree. Just taking note that we basically reviewed the different ones and made some priorities at the summit. And so this one's probably going to be tackled a little later on.
Yeah, so Gareth, you weren't at the summit, right?
No, I wasn't, unfortunately.
So I did in the agenda for today, I stuck a link. There's an issue with today's meeting edit, and I put a link to the slides that we through, and there's notes from that meeting are hidden in the presenter's view of the slide deck.
Yeah, I spotted that. I had a read through.
Yeah, okay, good.
Earlier today, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
But interesting.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you don't feel left out.
Yeah, if anything, if you have those minutes, it might be good to PR those into our regular minutes, like alongside the regular minutes.
Yeah.
Just so they're there and visible for posterity.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah, Tech Empower has been one that's been mentioned as well. What's your take on using those as well?
What I've seen, I haven't looked at them a ton, but they're doing not super complicated. So like they've got a JSON test case, and the test case is like a client hits your endpoint and you give back the same, 50-byte JSON string every time. It's better than a micro benchmark because they actually set up a server, but it's sort of a micro benchmark of a server.
Right. Okay.
So I'm not sure it's as interesting as it would be to have like Acme or a Node.js.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Just thought I'd see what your initial impression was.
Yeah, I haven't studied them in detail though.
Okay. Okay. So, as you said, there was some discussion, some prioritization. Sounds like you're going to be doing some work to fill out that that matrix.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to talk about? No? Okay, so then maybe we'll move on. I guess that's the end of our list in terms of what was on the agenda. Let me see if I can tell if there's anybody watching on the... I see one person watching. I don't see any comments other than somebody said it's 2018. So if there's any questions, we'll give people, maybe 30 seconds to a minute to post them in the YouTube chat. Otherwise, we will call it a day. Okay, let me just double check. Hopefully, I would see if there's any comments. I guess there's no comments for this week or no questions, so I think that's it. Thanks to everybody who attended.
Cool. Nice to see you
and
all.
We'll see you all next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.